Welcome back to Sportsbook Review Videos. Of course, we have the day off of NBA action with baseball's opening day and, of course, the national championship on here on Monday night. But it's time to take a look at a couple of playoff previews that we could be in line for, get prepped for potentially some profitable NBA postseason action. And one of the topics we need to discuss is some of the new blood that's entering the NBA playoffs. Already one team that missed the playoffs last year has clinched, and a couple of teams could be in line to clinch a playoff spot here within the next week or so if they can continue winning. Take a look at some of these teams and whether or not they might be good straight up upset values or ATS values heading into their matchups. And one of those teams is the Charlotte Hornets, team that's already clinched their playoff spot here in the Eastern Conference. Right now sitting sixth, but only one half game separates four teams in the Eastern Conference from 3 to 6. So the Charlotte Hornets could easily have a home court advantage here to get the playoffs if they continue winning. Teams like the Hawks and Heat and Celtics lose a little bit here down the stretch. I think it's very important for a team like Charlotte, who is a top 5 defensive rated team at home this season and play very good defense at home. Overall, very good team, ranking in the top 10 in both offensive and defensive efficiency. One of only 5 or 6 teams to do that in the entire league this season. And they're a very good team since they made the playoffs 2 years ago. They added Nicholas Batum. Kemba Walker's having one of the best seasons of his career. I think the Hornets could easily be in line to upset a team like Miami or Atlanta, especially with Miami a little banged up if Chris Bosh can't come back. I think Charlotte matches up pretty well against them and the Hawks, especially here if the Hawks don't bring their defense or if the Hawks lose out on home court advantage potentially. But even if Charlotte does not get home court advantage, they could easily be a good ATS bet against any one of these teams that they could face here in the first round of the playoffs, whether or not it's the Hawks, whether or not it's the Heat, the Celtics, one of those teams. Of course, as I said, only a half game separates those 4 teams, so a lot of shuffling left to do. Keep an eye on the Charlotte Hornets, though, however. They are going to be a force and a very tough out in the playoffs this season. The Detroit Pistons are another team. They have not played in the playoffs since 2009. They were the 8th seed, of course, won the championship just 3 years before that, and they have been in NBA purgatory and have been in the lottery 6 straight seasons, but they are 2 games up on the Chicago Bulls right now for the 8th seed. They could easily move into 7th as well, and I think that's a very important factor to keep in mind here with the Detroit Pistons because they play the Cleveland Cavaliers. Even though they might make it tough for them, I sincerely doubt they'd be a great wager, especially to upset them, but definitely I don't think against the spread either. However, they are currently have the same record as the Indiana Pacers. The Pacers are on the tiebreaker against them, so they could easily flip-flop with the Pacers, move up to the 7th seed, and if that's the case and they play the Toronto Raptors, that could be a very good opportunity to take the Pistons as a potential upset in that series, as well as against the spread and straight up in some of these games. Pistons are only 1-2 straight up against the Raptors this season, but 2-1 against the spread, and their most recent game and only straight-up win and against the spread win recently, that has come after the All-Star break and after the trade deadline since acquiring Tobias Harris. The Pistons easily won that game by double figures. I think they could easily beat the Toronto Raptors in a series here and make it very, very tough for them. Despite not having home court advantage, the Pistons aren't very deep, but they do match up very well against Toronto, so keep an eye on that if they do potentially jump up to that 7th seed and play the Toronto Raptors. But if they don't, they stick in that 8th seed against Cleveland, probably not the greatest wager. Finally, another team that you might not want to take too much of a look at here as an upset value with new blood in the playoffs here is the Utah Jazz. They're another team that has not clinched a playoff seed yet. They're only a game up on the Houston Rockets right now for the 8th seed. But, of course, if they do get that 8th seed, they get a first-round matchup with the Golden State Warriors. And while the Pelicans gave them some trouble, I think the Jazz probably not so much are a great wager in this one. Utah, obviously a very good team, but they are 0-7 against the Spurs and Warriors this season, 1-6 against the spread. They are like the Pistons, though. They could easily jump up to that 7th seed, but they don't have the benefit of getting a much better matchup if they jump up to the 7th seed, because they play the Spurs. As I said, combined, this team is 0-7 against the Warriors and Spurs this season straight up, only won 1 game against the spread. They've been blown out several times by both of those teams, so even though it would be nice to see the Jazz in the playoffs, don't consider them a great ATS or straight-up wager in the playoffs if they do indeed make it there. But that'll do it for me this time. Of course, we return to NBA picks on Tuesday. Stay tuned for that. But until then, for Sportsbook Review, I'm Jordan Sharp.